So we're going to talk about through lines tonight. And one of the things that I want to point out when it comes to Ancestry's tool is even though it doesn't always do everything that I want it to do, I want everyone to know that I am grateful for any tools that any of these companies invest in and any of the tools that we have available to use. So I don't want anyone to think that this is a complaint about through lines, but I think there are some things to be aware of when it comes to this particular product. So how do you see through lines? Well, first you have to take a DNA test at Ancestry. You have to opt in to see your DNA matches and to be seen by your DNA matches. So you can't hide your DNA matches and still use through lines. Your DNA test must be linked to your tree. So if you have a test or your mom has a test, your sister has a test, and they're linked to your tree, that's the way you're going to start seeing through lines. Your tree needs to be either public or it needs to be private and searchable. So if your tree is private and unsearchable, you're not going to see through lines. But if you, or so some of us who have research trees, maybe we're working on an unknown parent or grandparent or an adoption, and we have what we might call a quick and dirty tree, we're not going to see those if they're private and unsearchable. But as long as your tree is public or it's private and searchable, you will see through lines if your DNA test is linked to your tree. Tree completeness is a huge factor. So you want to have as many generations as you can, but you want to have fullness in your tree completeness. So the recommendation is at least 4 generations. So once you've linked your family tree, you have your tree set as private and searchable, or you have it set as public, you need to wait a few days while it populates. Sometimes I think the first time that I used it was probably 3 to 4 days. And anytime that I've made a change in it, for example, I've unlinked someone or I've added a key person in, it really takes 3 or 4 days to kind of fully implement that change. Ancestry's algorithm searches for people who are in your tree and in linked trees of your DNA matches. So other people have to have their DNA in their tree, and those trees are what show up in through lines. So accuracy. Through lines is only accurate as far as your tree is accurate and other people's trees are accurate. So we all know other people's trees, maybe not ours or maybe ours, have some issues sometimes. And so you want to be thinking about through lines as like a really awesome hint generator. And sometimes your DNA matches will be in more than one of your lines. Some people might be related to you in more than one way. And also some of the features don't work without an ancestry.com subscription. So I just want to put that out there because some people have limited accounts, or they did one of those DNA accounts years ago and have some limitations in what they can see on through lines. So here's what my page looks like on through lines. And so it says here, these through lines are generated using Kelly Bergheimer's DNA results that are linked to me and that are linked to my tree. And so it gives you kind of that spiel so that you know which one you're looking at, which is really helpful given the fact that I manage multiple people's tests. So you can see here's my father and here's my mother from my tree. And through lines captures up through about 5th great grandparents. And so you have, of course, 2 parents, 4 grandparents, and so on. And most of us have at least 32 unique 3rd great grandparents. Some of us have 64 unique 4th great grandparents if we don't have pedigree collapse. But basically what we're looking at is a total of about 250 ancestors that are populating through lines. Tree completeness is a big deal here because if your tree is not complete, through lines can actually help you with that by giving you hints. but you're going to have to work at it a little bit longer than if you have what you think is a fairly worked out and thorough tree. So we've talked before about DNA Painter and their tree completeness check or tool. And you can see here for mine that I have 100% for quite a few levels up to third great grandparents. But at the fourth great grandparent stage, I only know 48 of the 64 and also 48 of the 128 fifth great grandparents. So I still have some work to do on my tree. And I also have 12 people who appear more than once in my tree. And that's some of my mom's Tennessee family. There were, you know, cousins who married cousins and that sort of thing. So if you can mute yourself, let me go ahead and mute a couple people who are still unmuted. Okay. So you see here down in the corner, I've still got some work to do. So there are filters in ThruLines. So you can look at ancestors with new DNA matches. You can look at potential ancestors if you really want to kind of jump to that next level of figuring out maybe a brick wall. You can look at ancestors in your linked tree. You can click on maternal and paternal. So there's a lot of different filters that you can apply. So when you have a match on ThruLines, the match will be listed in one of the default categories. So for example, if your ThruLines DNA match shows a first cousin, it could still be other relationships. So you want to make sure still that you're applying what you know about centimorgans in common and things like that before you assume that the tool has everyone in the right place. And if you have an adoption or an unknown parent or grandparent, make sure you're linking your DNA to your biological tree, not to your adoptive parents. This is something that happened in my family where I had to actually detach someone from one of my parents so that I wasn't getting errant messages from ThruLines. And I use the DNA Painter Shared Centimorgan Project tool to determine other possible relationships for people. So I can enter the shared centimorgans and I can see whether or not the percentage of DNA is right or what other kinds of relationships they can be. And we've talked about this before. This is on DNA Painter, and it's one of the free tools that you don't even have to log in to use. So I'm going to show you a few of my ThruLines. This is one for my fourth great grandmother, Charity Gower, and she is a Tennessee, North Carolina border family. And so ThruLines is showing that I might be related to 30 DNA matches through Charity Gower. So it shows some of her children, and I'm a descendant of Stephen Hardy Clayton. So you can see my picture there, and it shows you in the little boxes, it'll say 5 or 4 or 4 in those gray boxes. That's how many generations are in between Stephen Hardy Clayton and me. So you can click on those and open them, and you can see how many other people there are in that lineage. So it goes from Stephen Hardy Clayton to another Clayton and a couple more till we get to my grandmother and my mother. So these are some of the descendants of Charity Gower. Not all. I believe I should have looked up how many she had, how many children. But these are the ones that have ThruLines and potential DNA matches. This one has a huge number. This is my Springer line, again, from Tennessee. So this is Charles Springer, and ThruLines suggests that I might be related to 122 of my DNA matches through Charles Springer. Not at all surprising. Most of my Southern families, I have huge numbers of people I'm related to on multiple testing companies. So this isn't even just Ancestry. I have that at 23andMe, at MyHeritage, and at Family Tree DNA, and even Living DNA. I have huge numbers of people from these Southern families. But you can see here, I just did kind of a snapshot of these springers. And so there's Dennis, Jacob, Jonathan, Aaron, John. And if you go to the left, you'll see that there's even more. I didn't include all of them, but you can see that I'm related through Aaron Springer, who's my fourth great grandfather. And then these are his siblings and some of the potential DNA matches. So again, this can help you with sorting, but remember, hints. It's hints. The other thing I want to point out, if you look down at the bottom, what it has here is 10 centimorgans, one segment, for a fifth cousin once removed. That's a match. I am very leery about small segments. I generally don't look at much on ThruLines that's below 25. You know, it's interesting. It might be relevant. It's possibly correct. But at the same time, small segments can be tricky. And when you're looking that far back, or you're looking in the present time to a fifth cousin once removed, there are some really small segments that can be involved there. And I could be related to that match in multiple ways, not just through Jacob Springer. If you look on the right with John S. Springer, you can see here that that is a fifth cousin once removed with 16 centimorgans, two segments. Again, I'm not, you know, I'm even less certain about that one, given the fact that it's two segments and 16, but it is something to investigate. You also notice, you can see this pretty clearly here in the center, there's a Jonathan, fourth great grand uncle. And then on the far right, there's a John, who's a fourth great granduncle. Entirely possible that that's the same person. So we have to evaluate not only the DNA relationships, we want to look at all of these children, all of these siblings of our ancestor, and there might be some duplication there because maybe someone has him as Jonathan in their tree, someone else has them as John S. in their tree. And we all know that most of the things we have at that time period in the late 17s or maybe early 1800s is, you know, census data that happened in the 1830s, 40s, 50s. So we're pulling names from there, and sometimes those names are different enough that people don't think it's the same person. So just keep that in mind. You want to evaluate every single part of it, the sibling part of it, the duplicate possible name part of it. And then if there's small segments, you really want to look at that closely. I can click on the list for Charles Springer. So over here, I was looking at the relationship. If I click on list, this is what I see, and you can open up shared matches. So this has each one of these people listed, each one of the siblings, Ezekiel, Dennis, Jacob, and so on. And you can open up and look at those matches. And you can see here, look at the one that I'm related to the most closely is Aaron Springer. There are 94 matches to Aaron Springer. So potentially quite a lot of people who are related to me and to my mother. The other thing to keep in mind, if you have a parent-child relationship, so I have my mom's DNA. So if this person is in my match list with a particular segment and showing the match as a fifth cousin once removed, I can look at my mom's results, and does my mom have the same match, just one generation closer? So that using that kind of phasing, we call it phasing, to look at how our parents have matches that we have, that adds validity to that segment. The fact that my mother has it and so do I. I can't have any DNA piece that matches someone that my mom doesn't have or that my dad doesn't have. So that kind of lends credence that it's something more serious to look at. This is one for my second great grandfather, Isaac Cannon Robbins. Again, this is my mom's side. I use a lot of my mom's side because they're so prolific, so many kids and that sort of thing. But this is Isaac Cannon Robbins, and I'm related through the one on the right. Charles C. Robbins is my great grandfather. Ada is my grandmother, and then my mother, April. And so if you look here, it started to fill in some names. And it's interesting to me when I look at these ones that are in green. Of course, some of them say private, but the one right in the center that says William Omer Shreves is interesting to me because I have an Uncle Omer, who's my grandmother's brother, and he married a Shreves. And so he married Bertha Shreves, who was married prior. Okay, so one thing that I know is that someone probably has my grandmother's brother Omer tied to the wrong sibling here. Now, it may be that there is another William Omer Shreves, but I think that is way too coincidental that my grand uncle Omer married Bertha Shreves and there's a William Omer Shreves in here. So that's definitely one that I'm going to evaluate. I'm not going to take that at face value. And then the others, of course, are private. Now, I have looked at some of the children of Nathan Robbins. He's in the upper left, Mary Louise and Linda Kay, and those two do appear to be in the right place. Although look at the birth year for Linda Kay. Do you see where it says 1046? So, you know, everything needs to be evaluated, right? So I don't believe that I have anyone in my tree right now who was born in 1046. Just saying. This is a potential ancestor. So I decided to look at the Todd family. And this is the through lines for William John Todd that suggests that I might be related to him. And I don't know why this photo is part of his upload on Ancestry on someone else's tree. I'm not sure what the significance is of that photo. I found it interesting, so I just wanted to keep it there for a minute. But what you see here is you can see kind of the top of my head here at the bottom that Samuel Todd, he is my fourth great grandfather. And there are a lot of DNA matches that I have verified, not only through Ancestry, but through 23andMe, MyHeritage, and Family Tree DNA. Many, many duplicate matches of second and third cousins in those multiple testing companies. But there are also some others that I'm not really sure about. I don't know if Samuel Todd had a sister Martha, or you know, these others that are over here as brothers on the left. So those definitely are worth looking at, and whether William John Todd is the right William John Todd that I think he is. So how will you use through lines? It's a hint generator. Every single piece needs verification. Birth and death and marriage records, census, if you can find it. You know, any kind of documentary evidence, land records, particularly in the South, the southern part of Ohio, sometimes land records are the only key to it, or wills and probate. Place DNA matches in your tree, and figuring them out is going to give you more information and lend more credence to your conclusions. And you definitely want to work on expanding your tree. Remember, there are some limitations to through lines. Other people's trees can be wrong. Your tree can be wrong. You always have that bio ancestors versus assumed bio ancestors who are not. That could be a problem, and not just in your tree, but in other people's trees as well. So if someone else is assuming a relative of yours is a bio ancestor and they're not, it's going to throw some through line hints in there. Don't forget about small segments. We talk all the time about the peril of small segments. Tree completeness is a big, big part of this. You can use through lines to help you build your tree out, but also you don't want to forget, you need to do that documentary evidence as well. Other people's tree completeness can be a problem. And some people detaching and reattaching their DNA is a big problem that I've seen. And this has happened to me before, where I was looking at something in through lines, and then I realized all of a sudden something is off, like a generation or two off. And what I've realized is some people will take their DNA results. You saw in the very beginning, my DNA results were attached to me and they were attached to my tree. And some people take their DNA results and attach them to their father or their grandfather, thinking that's going to push them further back. And don't do that. Just all I can say is please don't do that. It messed up some of what I was working on until they fixed it back again. It's not going to help you go further back, because remember, your DNA is a combination of your dad and your mom. So if you move your DNA, let's say I move my DNA to my mom's spot and attach it to her, then I've got my dad's DNA mixed in with my mom's DNA. And so it's going to throw all kinds of crazy hints. So please don't do that. I've seen people talk about that in the Facebook groups. Not a good idea. If you don't have Ancestry and you want to do something similar to ThruLines, I just have a couple screens that'll show you. 23andMe has that genetic family tree. It was in beta. I don't know if it's still in beta, but what I've been able to do on this is really piece together a lot of great information. But the way it's set up, just keep in mind that we're kind of oriented to left being male and right being female of a couple. And that's not the way this is. This is going purely on couple relationships and descendants. And so you might find that moms and dad's sides are swapped at different generation levels, and you can move them around. You can fix that if you want, but that's something that threw me for a loop the first few times I looked at it. But this one has been highly accurate because it's not based on family trees. It's based on DNA relationship. And then the last one I'll show you is MyHeritage has something similar to called smart matching. And I really, really like this smart matching. It sends me emails because I choose to be notified. It sends me emails and it says, you have 2 new smart matches and they're related to these 2 people. Do you want to see them? And when you click on view in your email, it'll take you to log in at MyHeritage so you can see those matches and you can see what other people have in their trees with respect to those folks. The helpful thing about that is because MyHeritage not only has US folks in the database, but lots of Europeans and a little bit different mix than what we have in our primarily American database. So I find that to be really helpful too. So I'm going to stop the recording.